Hey everybody, hope y'all are doing all right tonight. In this video, I want to talk about the Prepper's medicine cabinet. Your medicines that you should be stockpiling in the event that you can't get to a doctor or you can't afford a doctor or what have you. But before I get into that, I do want to put out there that nothing that I say in this video should be taken as medical advice. This is just based on what I'm doing and what I think others could probably benefit from or use as a guide for their own preparations. The medicines you take and the medicines that you store are entirely up to you based on your personal choices, based on your medical history, what you're able to take, what you have access to, etc. Any decisions regarding what you take should be between you and your doctor. So just putting that out there right up front. So consider your consult your medical provider, your doctor, before you take any kind of medications, particularly if you're already taking prescribed medications, because there's a lot of prescription drugs that have counterindications. And basically, to relate from my own story, I was on some steroids for the illness that I just recently recovered from. And during taking that steroid, I couldn't take any ibuprofen, any Tylenol, or anything like that because it could interact with the steroid itself. So understand that if you're taking prescribed medications, there may be some other OTC meds, over-the-counter medications, that you might not be able to take. The same also goes true with herbal medicines. If you're taking prescription medications, sometimes there are herbal medicines that you're not supposed to be taking because they can interact with the drug that you're prescribed. And quite often when those interactions happen, bad things occur. So just be aware of that and make these decisions based on research and information and what your doctor has to say. All right, second, any allergies you or anyone in your household might have, that's going to play a factor in what you store and what you put back. If you have children or infants in the home, you need to make sure that you store or stock up on medications and the formulations for children and infants. You can't give adult medication to children and infants because it'll be way too strong and it can cause some adverse reactions. Also, you need to consider whether or not anyone in the household has any special medical needs. This goes back to any existing prescribed medications that you're on from your doctor. Does anyone suffer from seasonal allergies or recurring issues? So if you're suffering from allergies, naturally you're going to want to stock up on the over-the-counter medications that you would be taking for that. Also, if you have recurring issues, for example, back pain or arthritis or something like that, you want to make sure you have plenty of the over-the-counter medicine that you would take for that as well. The next thing that a lot of people talk about is how much do you need to store? And again, this will be highly dependent on your needs and how long you feel you might not have access to medications, might not be able to get to a doctor, might not be able to get to a pharmacy or what have you. If you're prepping for a grid down scenario, then you're going to want more. But the rule of thumb is figure out exactly how much you need for your daily needs. How much do you usually use in a certain period of time? And then if you think that's enough, add a little bit more. That gives you a buffer, a cushion in the event that the situation drags out a little bit longer than you expect it to. You always want that margin for error. Again, keep in mind you're stocking up for your everyday needs in addition to unforeseen emergencies. So you need to plan accordingly. Finally, make sure that these meds that you're storing, make sure that they're stored out of reach of children in a secure place in a cool, dry, dark place. A lot of the things that can damage or ruin the quality of food also applies to medication. It has to be kept cool, dry, and dark. Light, heat, moisture, all of that will degrade medication just like it will food. Understand too that liquid medications will have a much shorter shelf life than pills or something, or even herbs, because they're much less stable. So you need to make sure you keep that in mind. And when you rotate, my thought process is that you should rotate your medicines out much like you do your food. That way you're always buying new to replace what you've used. And it doesn't hurt to go in every 6 months to a year and sort through your medications, check expiration dates, and just throw out anything that you're not comfortable with or you're concerned about. Now, in the regards to expiration dates, how long will medication last? The U.S. Army has done studies where, with very few exceptions, most medication is still effective and usable and safe to use for a year or two after its expiration date. Naturally, the efficacy of the drug will degrade a little bit, but it's still at least 90% effective within a year or so after its expiration date. Now, Cynthia Kolker, MD, author of Armageddon Medicine, wrote an outstanding reference article for the Journal of Civil Defense entitled Expired Medications, What You Need to Know. She quotes the Medical Letter, Volume 44, Issue 1142, on October 28, 2002, which states, many drugs stored under reasonable conditions retain 90% of their potency for at least 5 years after the expiration date on the label, and sometimes much longer. Again, there's very few exceptions. There are a couple, but there's very few exceptions where the drugs become unsafe after the expiration date. And I believe one of these is an antibiotic. I can't recall which one it is offhand. And to be honest with you, I don't even want to mention it on here because I'm not 100% sure of which one it is. So do your own research, use your own judgment. Now, sorry, I'm going over some of my notes here because there's a lot of stuff here. All right, another thing that I wanted to go over before we get into the list of medications is the difference between store brand and generic drugs. You've got, name brand and generic drugs. I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. So you've got a name brand drug, and then you've got store brand or generic, however you want to look at it. 9 times out of 10, if you look at the ingredients and the milligrams of that ingredient, it's going to be the same compound and the exact same dosage no matter which you buy. The only difference is the price that you're paying for the name brand versus the store brand or the generic. And sometimes this is a very considerable difference in price, as much as 50 to 75% more. You're paying for the name brand. Now, that being said, there are several medications where the cheaper store brand is often a different compound. So just because 9 times out of 10 it's going to be the same, there are occasions where it's going to be a different compound. And it's going to be in a different milligram. You need to be aware of that. You need to pay attention to it. And don't just make assumptions. Making assumptions with medication can get you killed. All right, so what should you stockpile? This is my list, and this is not an exhaustive list. There's a lot of things that you can add to this, and this is not even getting into the stuff that would be associated with first aid or in wound treatment, anything like that. This is just basic over-the-counter medications. First and foremost, I'm going to start off with pain relievers. You should store all types, in my opinion, because some people can take some and not others. If you're treating with one thing, you might not be able to take a certain pain reliever, so you'll want to have a variety so that you can make adjustments. Acetaminophen, Tylenol, ibuprofen, which can be found under the names Motrin or Advil, naproxen sodium, which would the name brand would be Aleve, aspirin, which would be Bayer or Ecotrin. Some of these are anti-inflammatory drugs, some aren't. Tylenol and ibuprofen can generally be taken together with a lot of efficacy. Sorry, I can't hardly talk tonight. They work really good in conjunction with one another in pain relief and fever reduction. However, that being said, use caution when combining drugs. You need to make sure you know what you're combining and whether or not it's safe to combine them. So, for various reasons, I like to stock up on everything. So I have all of these. I have acetaminophen, ibuprofen, naproxen sodium, and aspirin. And I make sure I have plenty of all of those. Those, you're going to probably go through more than just about anything else on here, unless you have allergies. So, the next thing is antihistamines. Brand name Benadryl. The compound is diphenhydramine. It's a great multi-purpose drug for you to stock up on. It's effective for respiratory infections, hay fever, allergies, hives, itching, and insomnia. And some people even use it for nausea. But it's a great multi-purpose drug. Very useful for having in your medicine cabinet. You can find it under Benadryl, but you can also find it in generic form. Another antihistamine would be Allegra or fexofenadine hydrochloride. It's commonly used to relieve allergy symptoms, often taken in combination with I can't talk. Sorry about that, folks. I can't talk tonight. Pseudoephedrine for increased relief of allergy symptoms. Again, putting this out there. Consult a doctor. Make sure you know what you're doing before you combine drugs. Okay, decongestants. You want to make sure you have a lot of decongestants on hand, but for the example, going through a flu, respiratory infections, sinus infections, all of that stuff, you'll go through these a lot faster than you think you will. I went through probably 2.5 boxes of multi-symptom cold and flu pills over the course of trying to recover from whatever it is I had. So the decongestant, pseudoephedrine, also known as Sudafed, you can still get that. It's great for relieving congestion of upper and lower respiratory tract. It's great for relieving symptoms associated with common cold, flu, hay fever, allergies, and bronchitis. Another one would be phenylephrine, HCI. It's one of the more common generic compounds. Next, you want to also have plenty of stomach medication, antidiarrheals. Loperamide, also known as Imodium, great for relieving or controlling diarrhea and relieving intestinal cramping. Diarrhea can quickly lead to dehydration, which can also be the leading cause of death in certain situations in third world countries, which can be exacerbated by unsanitary conditions, filthy water, and those are things that you'll really find common in a grid down SHTF scenario. Diarrhea as unpleasant as it is to talk about, can be life-threatening in those situations. So make sure you have plenty of that on hand. There's some others out there, but this is the only one I put on the list for brevity. In that same vein, emetics or anti-nausea medication. You've got meclizine, also known as Benine and Dramamine. It's an antiemetic drug. It relieves nausea, vomiting, motion sickness, and vertigo-like dizziness. It's helpful for anxiety and insomnia in some people. Omeprazole is another common anti-nausea drug. Flipping the scale a little bit, you'll want to have some laxatives on hand, because ask anyone that's ate MREs for a long period of time, you'll need stool softeners or laxatives from time to time. But just as diarrhea can be really dangerous and life-threatening in certain situations, constipation can be a very big problem as well. And understand that in a grid down SHTF, we're going to be switching our diet rapidly. We're going to most likely be eating a lot of things that we aren't accustomed to eating. Even if you try to stock everything that you normally eat, there's going to be a change in your diet. The quantity of what you eat, the volume is going to be different. That can, in some people, can cause a lot of stomach issues. Also, a lot of survival food, a lot of canned food has a very high sodium content that can cause issues in and of itself. So you want to make sure you have all three of these: antidiarrheals, anti-nausea, and laxatives. These will be critical in a grid down SHTF. You want to have some heartburn medication. Zantac is no longer available, but there's plenty of others on the market that are. One thing that I keep on hand, because I do a lot of forging, I do a lot of metal grinding, and if you're in dusty situations, it could come in handy. Saline eye wash for flushing debris out of your eyes. I have a lot of that on hand, simply because of the nature of some of the things that I do. I want to make sure I have plenty of stuff to flush my eyes out if I get debris or metal or dirt or sawdust or anything like that in my eyes. The next thing that I want to talk about is antibiotics. Now, there's a couple of ways you can go about this. But before I talk about them, again, antibiotics are something that you're going to have to do your own research on, and you're going to have to make up your own mind about. We're seeing a huge rise in antibiotic-resistant bacteria over the last year or two. This is primarily due to the overprescription and overuse of antibiotics. However, it's important for preppers to have ways of treating infections and preventing infections from becoming something more serious in a grid down situation. You're not going to be able to go to a doctor in those situations, and a simple cut from a rusty piece of metal could potentially become life-threatening. So, in addition to triple antibiotic ointments, you might want to consider storing antibiotics themselves. The problem is most antibiotics are unavailable without prescription. Now, there's some ways you can go about this. Anytime you get antibiotics, if you have any left over, naturally you would probably want to keep any extra that you have. Take what you need, of course, at the time. Don't be cutting back on your dosage just so you can stockpile. However, if you do have any left, it would probably be advantageous to save them. One option that a lot of people resort to, and again, some people have no problem with this, other people have a lot of issues with it, would be fish antibiotics. And there's very certain ones that are available online. I put out a video quite a while back about how they were going to be unavailable after June 11th. Turns out I was wrong about that. That particular law requiring prescriptions for antibiotics was for other types of antibiotics. It didn't necessarily apply to the fish antibiotics. Now, a lot of people say they're not safe for human consumption. If that's a concern for you, that's fine. But understand that I've heard this from doctors that say that if you look at the capsule, you look at the dosage amount, it's the exact same capsule, the exact same dosage that you would give a human. It's made in the exact same facility on the exact same production lines. They're just packaged differently. So because they're being packaged and sold for fish antibiotics, for animals, for fish, they have to put that out there that they're not safe for humans. But a lot of people would tell you that it's the exact same thing. Again, make up your own mind about that. Do your own research. I'm not making that decision for you, and I will not accept any responsibility if you choose to go that route. Just know that it is an option if that's some way one of the ways that you want to go about it. The next thing is, I've mentioned it before, Jace Medical, the Jace case. Now, there are a couple of other companies that do the exact same thing, but you can go through telemed or an online service and talk to a doctor. You'll actually talk to a licensed physician. They'll go over your medical history, your medical conditions. They'll write a prescription for this case. And you can actually buy this case. You don't have to actually go into a doctor. You don't necessarily have to have an immediate need for them right now, because the system or the service is set up to provide people with medications that they might need in an emergency. Sean Rowland is the doctor, is the founder of Jace Medical. And according to him, his top 5 antibiotics to have on hand for emergencies include amoxicillin, azithromycin, ciprofloxacin, doxycycline, and metronidazole. I know I probably mispronounced that. You can get the prescription. You can purchase these from Jace Medical. Now, the drawback to that is that it's kind of pricey. You'll get a nice little zippered case with a bunch of bottles in it, all the pills that you want. And I think there's different ones in there. It's not just antibiotics. There's some other stuff in there as well. I don't think there's any controlled substances in it. I don't think that would be allowed. So don't expect that. But if I remember right, this is going to cost somewhere around $300. If you have the money and if you can afford it, this is a great way to go. Your insurance may or may not cover it. I'm not sure. That's something you'll have to research. But if you don't have the money for this, if you can't afford this, you need to look at the other 2 options. Again, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you what is available. You have to make your own decisions. And again, this is not going into things like antibiotic ointments or saline flushes for wound care, or silver iodine, or silvadine or iodine or whatever. Wound treatments, bandages, or anything like that. That needs to be a whole separate video, because there's just way too much to cover in one video, which is why I had to break this one up. So I'm just putting it out there. This is the basic medication list. Pain relievers, antihistamines, decongestants, antidiarrheals, anti-nausea, laxatives, heartburn medication, saline. And naturally, this would also include things like cough syrups, over-the-counter cough syrups, multi-symptom cold and flu syrups and pills. You want a variety of this stuff. And again, just one or 2 bottles is not going to cut it, because when I was sick, I went through a couple of bottles of cough syrup, not even counting the cough syrup the doctor gave me. And I went through like 2.5 boxes of just like the Dayquil pills. You'll burn through way more of this stuff than you'll think you will. And I'm just one person. If you have a large family, you need to expand this stockpile accordingly. Okay, so I'm already at 24, almost 25 minutes. I'm going to cut it off there. Just understand you need to stock. My advice is you need to stock up on this stuff, because you never know when you'll need it. We saw through the pandemic how people couldn't even get into the stores. This stuff disappeared off the shelves. So it really pays to have this stuff on hand and in sufficient quantities for you and your family. That's all I've got. I appreciate you guys watching. Like, share, subscribe if you haven't. As always, stay safe, take care, keep prepping, don't get complacent. And until next time, folks, I'll catch you later.